I'm Elder Small, and I'd like to welcome you to this session. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to just basically pick up where I left off at, using the analogy of traveling the highways and byways of the world, being out on the road, with a focus being on the idea of going to sleep while out on the open road. Many of us have had the experience of driving and suddenly waking up, whether in the bright light of the day or the darkness of the night. We opened our eyes only to realize we had fallen asleep at the wheel. This has happened to me more than once, and I am genuinely grateful to my ancestors, my spirit guides, and my guardian angels for their presence in those moments, which helped me to open my eyes. I remember the time I visited family in Oakland, California, and after enjoying a lot of fun and fellowship, it was time to make the 390-mile drive back to my home in Los Angeles. I went to bed early, got plenty of sleep, knowing I would hit the road early the next morning. After a light breakfast and a cup of coffee, I said my goodbyes, got in my car, and headed home on what would be a 4 or 5 hour drive. I took Highway 14 to Highway 480, then merged onto Interstate 5, which connects Oakland to Los Angeles. While driving on Interstate 5, I suddenly woke up and realized I was about to collide with a big rig truck, a 18-wheeler. With less than seconds to respond, I turned the steering wheel and narrowly avoided what could have been a fatal accident. I was out there on the open highway knowing I had hundreds of miles to drive. My eyes were heavy, and so I began looking for a rest area where I could pull off the road. And I can't express how relieved I was when I finally drove into the rest area, turned off my car, and took a moment to reflect on what had just happened. Eventually, I closed my eyes, rested my mind, and went to sleep. I didn't open my eyes until I felt fully awake and confident. And so it was then that I drove out the rest area and back onto the highway. It's hard to describe how I felt when I suddenly woke up behind the wheel of a car moving at 65 miles per hour, narrowly avoiding what could have been a deadly accident. But years later, I experienced similar emotions when, after undertaking extensive religious studies, I discovered a body of literature that resonated with my heart, my mind, and my soul. It offered insights into the authorship and purpose of the Old and New Testaments. It challenged years of African American cultural tradition and religious programming. Months passed, then years passed as I studied and investigated Rome, the Roman Empire, its emperors, and the aristocracy of the Romans and the Jews. Notably, the Roman Empire, it emerged from the Roman Republic, which marked a very significant shift in power. The power shifted from the councils and the Senate to power being consolidated in the hands of one man. This transition was notably highlighted by Julius Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, who defeated his main rival, Marcus Antonius, also known as Mark Antony, at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. With Rome's power consolidated or centralized in a single ruler, The Roman emperor was responsible for sustaining and expanding the empire while maintaining control over the population. And this was no simple task. Through strategic military maneuvers and conquests, the Romans established an empire that spanned from Spain to Turkey and from Egypt to the northern border of Scotland. As Roman armies conquered neighboring nations, they assimilated their religions, their customs, and their trading practices. Rome began to look and feel like major metropolitan areas, those such as California, New York, New Mexico, Mexico City, London, Paris, New Delhi, Tokyo, Accra, Lagos. Uh, Rome was urbanized, it was cosmopolitan, it was multinational and multi ethnic. While traveling in Rome, the road signs conveyed messages of sophistication, brutality, strength, power, tyranny, and greed. Most notably, one could sense that the military maintained control over the empire. Rome was a melting pot of trading practices, traditions, cultures, and religious beliefs, and as a result, Roman aristocrats encouraged integration and the practice of syncretism, which allowed for the blending of various traditions, cultures, and religious beliefs. The Romans sought to pacify the people of their empire by recognizing the many gods of their empire and constructing temples and shrines dedicated to these deities and their associated spiritual practices. As a consequence, Roman gods were venerated alongside local and regional gods, with worship shared among commoners, politicians, and aristocrats. In ancient times, religion and politics were closely intertwined, and the Roman policy of religious tolerance played a crucial role in the growth, stability, and longevity of the Roman Empire. Even so, a threat loomed within the empire, and the threat had to do with Judaism's monotheistic teaching. Jewish monotheism challenged Roman policy and its system of syncretic religious practices. The Jewish problem lasted for centuries and came to be known as a thorn in the empire's flesh, a thorn which they wished to remove. And as time passed, the Roman aristocracy they were lenient and made compromises to accommodate the Jewish people. For example, the Jews believed in one God and considered it an idolatrous transgression of the first commandment to worship other gods. Thus, the Romans granted them special exemptions from public worship of Roman state deities. But this wasn't enough to quash the Jewish resistance to Roman rule. The hardline Jews, known as the Sicarii or the Zealots, they were a disciplined messianic group deeply committed to monotheism and the Torah. They resisted any and every attempt at social, cultural, and religious integration. As a consequence, the Romans accused the Jews of fostering discord throughout the empire, and this led to the rise of anti Semitism. To give you a picture of what was going on, I turned to the Anchor Bible Dictionary, a wonderful set of dictionaries, volume 6. It says, and I quote, resistance to Roman rule, both violent and nonviolent, was widespread. Resistance came from virtually every quarter: Pharisees, high priests, peasants, local villagers, Jerusalemites, and people of every geographical sector. The causes and motivations varied tremendously: poverty, overtaxation, incompetent procurators, and unruly soldiers, as well as a variety of beliefs, including zeal and commitment to the law. Far from being a single unified sect dragging the rest of the nation into war, there's a picture of much of the nation in resistance, struggling to cope with the foreign occupation by the Romans. A picture that coheres well with what we know otherwise of the diversity in first century Judaism. By the time this turmoil came to a head in 66 CE, the war was supported by some portions of virtually every sector of the populace, cutting across sectarian categories, economic classes, and geographical regions. End of quote. And so, in simple terms, there were those among Jewish sects, the Sicarii, the Zealots, who would not stand by and allow their social, economic, and religious traditions to be exploited. This was the impetus for the conflict and wars between the Jews and the Romans. In many ways, the conflict between the Jews and the Romans was no different from the conflict between the Jews and Greeks that had taken place a few centuries earlier. Alexander the Great conquered Judea in 333 BCE, and this led to the spread of Hellenism in the region, Hellenism being the spread of Greek culture. Alexander and his successors established more than 30 cities within Judea, and in those cities, the people, that is, the Jews, assimilated various aspects of Greek culture into their culture. One glaring example is that many of the Jewish population, many people in the Jewish population thought it wise to learn to speak Greek, and wealthy Jews believed it was best for their children to receive a Greek education. After Alexander's death, the Seleucids, descendants of Seleucus, and the commander of Alexander's elite guard, eventually became rulers over the region. In 169 BCE, and Antiochus became the Seleucid ruler, and he was determined to unify the Middle East by mandating that his subjects become one people. They were to renounce their religion, whatever religion that was, and become Greeks. He even went as far as to remove Jewish high priests and appoint high priests who were on his payroll. The high priest then converted or sold his followers on Hellenism, that is, on Jewish culture. In 168 BCE, a rebellion against Hellenization broke out. Antiochus responded by ordering his troops to march on Jerusalem. In the Apocrypha, 2nd Maccabees, chapter 5, verses 12 through 14, we have a report on the incident. And I quote, "He commanded his soldiers to cut down without mercy as come in their way, and to kill such as went up on their houses. And there was killing of young and old, making away of boys, women, and children, slaying of virgins and infants, all and all, and in all the 3 days of the slaughter, there were destroyed 80,000, wherefore 40,000 were slain in close combat, and no fewer were sold than slain." End quote. And so, in Jerusalem, Antiochus stripped the temples of their sacred vessels, and he violated the holies of holies. With no regard for Judaism at all, he ordered the Jewish rituals and religious practices to be replaced with Hellenistic rituals and worship. He banned circumcision and sacrifices, instituted monthly observance of his birthday, and placed a statue of Zeus on the Temple Mount. In 167 BCE, a devoted family, the Maccabees, revolted against Hellenization, including the practice of sacrifices to Zeus in the temple. The Maccabees, they sought to restore Judaism in Judea and fought to gain control over various cities in the region. Once they took control, they enforced Jewish law. This was stated, or we find a record of this in First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 41, where it says, "In the 170th year, the yoke of the heathen was taken away from Israel." And so the Apocrypha, it contains books excluded from the Christian Bible, including 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Nevertheless, understanding the Maccabean resistance helps us grasp the circumstances that would eventually lead the Roman aristocracy to call for a new religion. Roman expansionism and Hellenization, or Hellenistic culture, took hold in Judea, chipping away at Maccabean rule and Judaism. In 65 BCE, a civil war erupted between rival factions vying for the throne in the Maccabean dynasty. During that tumultuous time, Herod's father, Antipater, an Edomite who had converted to Judaism, emerged as a key figure. Antipater played a crucial role in facilitating Roman intervention in the Civil War. When Pompey invaded Palestine in 63 BCE, Antipater supported his campaign, which marked the beginning of a beneficial association with Rome for himself and his son. Julius Caesar gained the favor of Antipater's family and appointed him procurator of Judea in 47 BCE. He also conferred Roman citizenship upon Antipater, which was passed down to Herod and his children. That same year, Herod made his political debut when his father appointed him governor of Galilee. 6 years later, Mark Antony named him the Tetrarch of Galilee. The Hasmonean dynasty, they were descendants of the Maccabees, and they ruled Judea in 140 BCE. The Hasmoneans, they were heavily influenced by Greek Hellenization and maintained their power until the Romans deposed them and appointed Herod the Great as king of the Jews in 40 BCE. Initially, Judea and Judah and Rome were allies, but in 6 BCE, Judah became a Roman province. Soon after, the relationship between the Roman occupiers and the Jewish people descended into total chaos. In the 1st century of our era, during the reign of the infamous Emperor Caligula, conflicts between Jews and Greeks intensified in Alexandria. His successor, Claudius, did not improve the situation. Violent clashes erupted between Romans and Messianic Jews in the capital of Rome itself. And without delving too deeply into historical analysis, let me say that here we have, or here lies the context surrounding the creation or the origins of Christianity. Jewish culture, particularly among the priests and aristocracy, was significantly influenced by Greeks due to centuries of Hellenization. This process involved the adoption of Greek culture, religion, and language. With the Romanization of the Jewish Hellenized classes, corruption became the norm among the elite. The local Greeks and Hellenized Jewish elites supported the Romans and appropriated for themselves the social status and finer things that the Romans brought to the table. As the Jewish elite carved out a higher place in society for themselves, they did whatever was necessary to maintain the status quo, including opening up their synagogues to Roman deities. The revenue generated from commerce in the Jerusalem markets, it didn't circulate back into the economy. No, the revenues went straight into the pockets of the aristocracy, and this infuriated the common Jewish man. All of this taken together caused the Jewish ruling class to lose support of the people, consequently causing the people to pursue solutions for their problems from within the ranks of those faithful to Jewish tradition and law. The Sicarii here, they played a crucial role in Jewish tradition and stood firm against the pressures of Hellenistic and Roman authorities. In 66 CE in Caesarea, it was the Sicarii who sparked a revolt. The Jewish people were fed up with corruption, classism, and feeling ignored. Inspired by the Sicarii, they launched attacks against the Roman backed elite Greeks residing in the area, resulting in violence and chaos. And in response, Emperor Nero ordered the Roman military general Vespasian to eliminate the rebel armies and punish the citizens of the Judean province. Vespasian, along with his son Titus and their army, entered Judea and killed nearly every Jewish rider in Caesarea and northern Galilee. Estimates suggest that as many as 10,000 Jewish people were either killed or sold into slavery, while the surviving riders fled to Jerusalem. The rebellion in Judea marked the start of two long and bloody wars that took place in the region, resulting in the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives and the enslavement of many more. During the conflict, during this Judean conflict, forces loyal to Vespasian revolted against Vitellius, the last of the Julio-Claudian emperors, and seized control of Rome. Vespasian then returned to Rome and was proclaimed the emperor. In 70 CE, the son of the Roman emperor Vespasian, he took command of the army and laid siege to Jerusalem for 7 months. After the siege, the Romans ransacked the temple and set it ablaze. During this turmoil, thousands of people were killed and many others were enslaved or forced to fight as gladiators, often to their deaths. The Flavians, they emerged as the most influential figures in the Roman Empire, controlling the region from Egypt to Syria. They worked closely with two other prominent families of Hellenized Jews, the Herods and the Alexanders. These three families shared a financial interest in preventing future revolts. Although the families had ended the Jewish revolt, they had not eradicated the rebels' messianic beliefs. The families needed to address the underlying expectation that the Messiah would lead his people to military victory to prevent these zealots from inciting future uprisings. Although this is intended to be a simple reflection of the political, social, and religious context in which Christianity emerged, the primary point is that Christianity arose as a solution to the conflicts between the Greco Romans and the Jews. Not only did the Romans adopt Christianity as the empire's official religion, but Christianity also became the first known religion, similar to the Roman Empire, to spread globally. As a result, it has transformed into one of it has been transformed into one of the most powerful institutions in the world. Only in the last 2 or 3 centuries has it become possible to publicly examine the origins of Christianity without facing accusations of heresy, which, would often lead or often carried a death sentence. Almost all scholars who study the origins of Christianity acknowledge the significance of the contemporary political, social, cultural, and religious context in which it emerged. We cannot overlook that Christianity arose during a time of conflict between Messianic Jews and the Roman Empire. This is too significant to be merely coincidental. And so I'm going to stop there, and in doing so, I'm going to grant that you may experience the greatest good in your life and strive to live a life of intellectual greatness. Dua, Hotep, Ashe.